The abandoned promise Olivia Jensen stared at the positive pregnancy test, her hands trembling slightly as autumn rain tapped against her apartment window. At 23, this wasn't part of her carefully crafted plan. Finish graduate school, establish her career as an art conservator, then maybe consider a family. She glanced at her phone, rehearsing how she would tell Dominic. They had met during her junior year at Northwestern University. Dominic Reed was a visiting entrepreneur speaking to business students about his first successful startup. Their eyes had locked across the crowded auditorium, and by evening they were sharing coffee and dreams. Dominic spoke of building a tech empire. Olivia described preserving history through art restoration. Their worlds couldn't have been more different, yet for 2 years they'd made it work. "He loves me," she whispered to herself. "We'll figure this out together." Olivia called Dominic that evening, but the conversation was brief. He was in San Francisco meeting with investors, sounding distracted and hurried. "Can we talk when I'm back? This deal could change everything for us," he promised. 3 days later, she sat across from him in their favorite coffee shop. Dominic's dark hair was perfectly styled, his tailored jacket suggesting he'd come straight from another meeting. His expression shifted as she told him, morphing from surprise to something harder to read. "A baby? Now?" His voice remained low, controlled. "Olivia, we've talked about this. I'm at a critical point with the company. We're about to secure Series B funding." "I know the timing isn't ideal," she said, reaching for his hand. "But maybe this is a blessing in disguise. We've talked about having a family someday." "Someday." The word hung between them. "Not now. Not when I'm this close. So what are you saying?" Dominic's eyes darted around the cafe, as though seeking escape. "I need time to think." That night, Olivia waited for his call. Then the next day. And the next. Her messages went from concern to pleading. When she finally reached his apartment, his neighbor mentioned he'd left for Singapore on business. Weeks passed. Olivia eventually received a text. "I can't do this right now. The company needs all of me. I'll wire you money." The money arrived along with legal papers relinquishing parental rights. No signature, no conversation, just the cold practicality of a man cutting ties. Winter settled over Chicago as Olivia faced her new reality. Her graduate advisor noticed her distraction during a restoration project. "Your mind is elsewhere, Olivia," Professor Winters observed. "Is everything all right?" The kindness in her voice broke something inside Olivia. Through tears, she explained her situation. "You have options," Professor Winters said gently. "Whatever you choose, don't let one person's abandonment define your path." Olivia considered every possibility, spending nights researching and soul-searching. By spring, her decision was made. She would have this baby, her baby, and create a life filled with love, even if that meant doing it alone. Her parents were shocked but supportive. "Come home to Portland," her mother urged. "Let us help you." But Olivia needed to prove something to herself. She completed her semester, arranged to finish her degree remotely, and found a small apartment near a promising conservation studio that offered flexible hours. The first ultrasound showed a healthy heartbeat. Alone in that darkened room, watching the flickering proof of life on the monitor, Olivia made a promise. "You and me, little one. We don't need someone who doesn't want us. I'll give you everything, a home, a future, and enough love for 2 parents. Dominic Reed might build his empire, but he'll never know what he gave up." As summer arrived, Olivia started her new job, her growing belly a reminder of both loss and possibility. She deleted Dominic's number, returned unopened envelopes of money, and focused forward. If ambition was his choice, then resilience would be hers. Solitary strength. The first year of motherhood tested every fiber of Olivia's being. Sophie Amelia Jensen arrived on a snowy January morning after 36 hours of labor. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of determination, with a shock of dark hair that reminded Olivia of what she'd lost. But one look at those curious brown eyes, and Olivia knew she'd made the right choice. "She's perfect," whispered Olivia's mother, who had flown in for the birth. "She is," Olivia agreed, tracing her daughter's tiny fingers. "And she's ours." The early months blurred together in a haze of midnight feedings, stolen naps, and the constant juggling of responsibilities. Olivia's modest apartment became headquarters for her dual life, art conservator by day, mother around the clock. She converted half her living room into a nursery, painted clouds on the ceiling, and built a life within the constraints of her new reality. The conservation studio proved more understanding than she'd dared hope. Her boss, Eleanor, had raised 2 children alone and recognized the determined exhaustion in Olivia's eyes. "Bring her in on Fridays," Eleanor suggested. "We'll set up a playpen in the back office." So began their routine. 4 days a week, Sophie attended a subsidized daycare while Olivia painstakingly restored paintings and artifacts. Fridays became studio days, with Sophie babbling contentedly as her mother worked on less hazardous projects. By Sophie's 2nd birthday, Olivia had established a reputation for her meticulous work on Renaissance-era paintings. A small promotion allowed her to move to a 2-bedroom apartment with a tiny garden patch. Each milestone, Sophie's first steps across their new living room, her first coherent sentence. The first day of preschool, Olivia documented carefully in journals and photographs, creating the family history that would someday answer inevitable questions. "Mommy, where's my daddy?" Sophie asked one evening as Olivia tucked her into bed. She was 4 then, observant enough to notice the difference between her family and others at her preschool. Olivia had rehearsed this moment. "Your daddy had to follow a different path than ours, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices about their lives. Doesn't he want to know me?" The innocent question stung more than any sophisticated accusation could have. "He made his choice before he knew how amazing you would be," Olivia said, smoothing Sophie's hair. "But that doesn't mean you aren't deeply loved. You have me, Grandma and Grandpa, Aunt Rachel, and so many others." As the years passed, Olivia built a network of support. Fellow single parents, work colleagues, neighbors who became family by choice rather than blood. She dated occasionally, cautious relationships that ended when the men couldn't understand why Sophie would always come first. By Sophie's 8th birthday, Olivia had been promoted to head conservator at the Portland Museum of Fine Arts. Her specialization in Renaissance works had earned her invitations to consult internationally, though she accepted only those that could accommodate Sophie's school schedule or summer breaks. "You've done remarkably well," her mother commented during Sophie's birthday celebration, watching the confident little girl directing her friends in a backyard scavenger hunt. "Both of you," Olivia smiled, but felt the familiar twist of something unresolved. "I still wonder sometimes if I should have tried harder to make him understand what he was giving up." "That was his responsibility, not yours," her mother replied firmly. "You gave him a choice. He made it." That evening, after tucking an exhausted Sophie into bed, Olivia found herself scrolling through business news on her tablet. She rarely indulged this habit anymore, this checking on Dominic's world. But tonight, a headline caught her eye. "Reed Technologies announces breakthrough AI platform. Stock soars." The accompanying photo showed Dominic at a sleek podium, confident and polished in an expensive suit, gesturing to projection screens behind him. His face showed the subtle changes of a decade, more angular, perhaps harder, but his eyes still held that ambitious gleam. Olivia closed the browser, wondering not for the first time if in his quiet moments, Dominic ever thought about what might have been. She looked toward Sophie's room, listening to her daughter's peaceful breathing through the half-open door. "Your loss," she whispered to the darkness, and meant it. Empty empire. Dominic Reed stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, surveying San Francisco's skyline as sunset painted the glass towers in gold. At 38, he had achieved everything on his meticulously crafted 10-year plan. Reed Technologies employed over 5,000 people across 3 continents. Their artificial intelligence platforms revolutionized industries from healthcare to finance. His personal fortune had reached billionaire status after their latest acquisition. "Mr. Reed?" His assistant's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The board is waiting in the conference room." Dominic nodded, straightening his custom tie. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." When the door closed, he allowed himself a moment of unusual honesty. Despite the trappings of success surrounding him, the awards lining his walls, the influence he wielded with a single phone call, a persistent emptiness had taken residence in his chest. It appeared in quiet moments between triumphs, expanding yearly like a slow-growing tumor he couldn't excise. The board meeting proceeded efficiently. Quarterly projections exceeded expectations. Their new neural network had outperformed competitors in every benchmark test. Dominic presented with practiced confidence, fielding questions with the strategic precision that had become his trademark. "Brilliant work, as always, Dominic," said Vernon Blackwell, his longest-serving board member after the others had filed out. "Though I must say, you seem distracted lately?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "The Tokyo expansion requires attention to detail. Nothing more." Vernon, 20 years his senior and perhaps the closest thing to a mentor Dominic had allowed himself, studied him with uncomfortable perception. "I've known you since you were pitching your startup from a garage," Vernon said. "You've achieved everything you set out to do, but I've noticed something missing lately." "Missing?" Dominic's tone hardened slightly. "We just posted record profits." "Not in the business," Vernon clarified. "In you." The observation lingered uncomfortably as Dominic's driver navigated through evening traffic to his Pack Heights mansion. The house, 12,000 square feet of architectural brilliance overlooking the bay, echoed with emptiness as he entered. He loosened his tie, poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, and wandered through immaculate rooms designed by a celebrated interior decorator he'd barely met. Nighttime often brought the memories he suppressed during daylight hours. Olivia's face appeared unbidden in his thoughts. Her expression when he'd last seen her in that Chicago cafe, hope crumbling as he hesitated to embrace the future she offered. For years, he had justified his choice as necessary sacrifice. The company wouldn't have survived his divided attention. Investors wouldn't have backed a distracted founder with family obligations. Now, a decade later, those justifications rang hollow. His therapist, recommended by his executive coach to address his difficulty with work-life boundaries, had been pushing him to confront this aspect of his past. "You've structured your entire life around achievement," Dr. Winters had observed during their last session. "Have you considered what you've sacrificed for it?" Dominic had deflected the question, but it resurfaced now as he stood in his empty kitchen. His relationships followed a predictable pattern, brief entanglements with equally ambitious professionals that burned out quickly. His parents had passed away 3 years apart, his father never witnessing his greatest successes. Friends had drifted into the periphery, replaced by business associates and subordinates. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Reminder, Portland Museum Restoration Wing dedication tomorrow. Foundation speech at 2 p.m. Jet departs SFO 10. M. The Reed Foundation, his tax-efficient vehicle for philanthropy, had funded a new conservation wing at the Portland Museum of Fine Arts. Tomorrow's ceremony represented the kind of obligation he routinely fulfilled: appear, make appropriate remarks, take photographs, move on. The details barely registered as he confirmed his attendance. That night, dreams disturbed his usually efficient sleep cycle. He was walking through an endless house, opening doors that led to empty rooms. In the final room stood a small child with her back turned. When he called out, she began to fade before he could see her face. Dominic woke before dawn, unsettled. He showered and dressed mechanically, reviewing his foundation speech on the drive to his private hangar. The words about preserving cultural heritage and investing in future generations seemed hollow, crafted by his communications team rather than reflecting any genuine conviction. As his jet climbed into the morning sky, Dominic gazed at San Francisco receding below him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to wonder, what if he had made a different choice that day in Chicago? What if ambition hadn't been his only compass? The question lingered as Oregon's landscape appeared beneath him, a thought that would soon collide with a reality he never prepared for. Revelation at the gallery, the Portland Museum of Fine Arts, buzzed with anticipation. Board members in formal attire mingled with conservators and local dignitaries beneath the soaring glass ceiling of the new Renaissance restoration wing. Champagne flowed as photographers captured the museum director beside an Oversized check bearing the Reed Foundation. Logo Dominic navigated the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries while his mind remained partially detached. These events followed a predictable script. Handshakes, appreciative nods, brief conversations forgotten by morning. "Mr. Reed, we're absolutely thrilled with the new spectrographic analysis equipment," gushed the museum director. "It's transformed our restoration capabilities." "Glad to hear it," Dominic replied with his media-ready smile. "The foundation believes in supporting technical innovation in the arts. Our head conservator would love to show you some of the work being done. She's brilliant, revolutionized our approach to Renaissance pigment preservation." Dominic checked his watch discreetly. His pilot had filed a return flight plan for 5 p.m. Perhaps a brief tour. The director led him through the gallery, past paintings in various stages of restoration. Staff members nodded respectfully as they passed, several doing double takes at the billionaire in their workspace. "Most of our team is here today, though our head conservator had a family commitment this morning. She should be, there she is, with her daughter." Dominic followed his gesture toward a woman in a conservative black dress, kneeling to straighten the collar of a young girl's blouse. Something about her profile triggered a distant recognition. When she stood and turned, the champagne flute nearly slipped from his fingers. Olivia. 10 years had softened some features while sharpening others. Her chestnut hair was shorter, elegantly framing her face. The uncertain graduate student had transformed into a woman of evident confidence and accomplishment. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. They widened now in unmistakable recognition, then narrowed slightly. "Olivia Jensen, our Director of Conservation," the museum director announced, oblivious to the sudden tension. "Olivia, this is Dominic Reed of the Reed Foundation." "We've met," Olivia said coolly, extending her hand with professional detachment. "It's been some time, Mr. Reed." "Indeed it has," Dominic managed, struggling to maintain his composure as his past materialized before him. But it was the girl beside Olivia who shattered his carefully constructed reality. She appeared to be 9 or 10, with familiar dark hair and intelligent eyes that assessed him curiously. Something in her analytical gaze, the slight tilt of her head, he recognized himself with breathtaking clarity. "This is my daughter, Sophie," Olivia said, her hand protective on the girl's shoulder. "Sophie, this is Mr. Reed, whose foundation funded our new equipment." "Your work is very detailed," Sophie observed with surprising poise. "I watched the conservators cleaning a painting from the 1600s. They used cotton swabs smaller than pencil erasers." "Sophie is quite interested in art preservation," Olivia explained, her eyes never leaving Dominic's face, watching his reactions with careful scrutiny. "It requires patience," Dominic replied, addressing the girl directly while calculations raced through his mind. The timing, the resemblance. This was his daughter. The revelation struck him with physical force. "Would you excuse us for a moment?" The museum director gestured to a board member waving urgently from across the room. "Conservation emergency with the Botticelli, I'm afraid." As they departed, an uncomfortable silence descended. Sophie looked between the adults, sensing undercurrents she couldn't fully comprehend. "Mom, can I go see if they're working on the Botticelli? I promised to stay behind the ropes." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "Stay where I can see you." When Sophie moved away, the practiced veneer fell from Dominic's expression. "She's mine, isn't she?" Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Biologically speaking, yes. In every way that matters, no. She's mine." "Why didn't you—" "Don't." Olivia's voice remained low but carried unmistakable warning. "Don't pretend I didn't try to reach you. Don't pretend you didn't make your choice abundantly clear." The accusations struck with precision. Dominic glanced toward Sophie, examining features he should have known for years, his mother's chin, his own expressions. "Does she know about me?" "She knows her father chose a different path," Olivia replied. "She knows I've never lied to her, and I won't start now." A photographer approached, asking for a picture of the foundation representative with the conservation director. They posed with professional smiles, an appropriate distance between them as the camera flashed. "We should talk," Dominic said when they were alone again. "Properly? I'm not sure there's anything to discuss," Olivia countered. "You made your priorities clear a decade ago. Things change. People change." Olivia studied him, weighing sincerity against suspicion. "My priority is protecting Sophie. She's had a stable, happy life." "I'm not looking to disrupt that," Dominic said, surprising himself with his own certainty. "But now that I know—" He struggled to articulate the seismic shift occurring within him. "I can't unknow it." Across the gallery, Sophie was attentively watching a conservator demonstrate cleaning techniques, her expression serious and focused. Dominic saw his own childhood concentration mirrored in her furrowed brow. "Coffee," Olivia finally said. "Tomorrow morning. There's a cafe on Morrison Street called Timeless Brew, 9 o'clock. Sophie will be at her piano lesson." Dominic nodded. Understanding this wasn't forgiveness or even acceptance, merely a postponement of a conversation too consequential for this setting. As he delivered his prepared speech later that afternoon, words about legacy and future generations took on painful new significance. From the podium, he spotted Olivia and Sophie in the audience, the child leaning to whisper something that made her mother smile. His empire suddenly seemed constructed from hollow materials, achievements that couldn't begin to compare with what he'd discarded. The revelation left him shaken as his jet carried him back to San Francisco, his mind filled not with market projections or acquisition strategies, but with the image of a daughter he'd never known, and the daunting question of what, if anything, he could possibly do to make amends. Bridges of forgiveness. The cafe was crowded with Saturday morning patrons when Dominic arrived, precisely at 9. He spotted Olivia in a corner booth, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug, expression guarded. The casual jeans and sweater she wore contrasted with yesterday's professional armor, making her seem both more approachable and more real. He slid into the seat opposite her, declining the server's offer of a menu with a request for black coffee. "You look well," he began, aware of the inadequacy of such conventional openers. "Let's not pretend this is a casual reunion," Olivia replied. "You wanted to talk, so talk." Dominic had rehearsed this conversation during a sleepless night, yet now found himself struggling for words. "She's remarkable," he finally said. "Sophie, you've done an incredible job with her." "No thanks to you," Olivia observed, though without the bitterness he might have expected. "But yes, she is remarkable." "I want to know her," Dominic stated simply. "I understand I have no right to ask, but I'm asking anyway." Olivia studied him over the rim of her mug. "Why now? Because the universe forced this confrontation? If we hadn't crossed paths yesterday, would you ever have looked for us?" The question pierced with uncomfortable accuracy. "I told myself the decision was made," he admitted. "That reopening that door wouldn't be fair to anyone." "But the truth?" He met her gaze directly. "I've thought about you, about what might have happened, more than I've allowed myself to acknowledge." "That doesn't answer my question." "No, it doesn't," Dominic agreed. "And I can't change the past 10 years. All I can say is that seeing Sophie has shifted something fundamental in me. I want the chance to know my daughter." "She's not a business opportunity," Olivia said sharply. "You can't suddenly decide to acquire an interest when it suits you. That's not what this is, isn't it? Your entire life is built around calculating value and optimal timing. What happens when this novelty wears off? When board meetings and acquisitions reclaim your attention? Sophie deserves consistency, not a part-time father who disappears when something more important comes along." Her words struck with precision, exposing fears Dominic himself harbored. Could he actually commit to this? Was he capable of prioritizing someone else above his ambitions? "I understand your skepticism," he said slowly. "I haven't given you reasons to believe otherwise. But people can change, Olivia. Even me." The server delivered his coffee, creating a momentary pause in their confrontation. When she departed, Olivia's expression had softened marginally. "Tell me honestly," she said. "Are you happy, Dominic? Has everything you sacrificed for been worth it?" The question hung between them, demanding a level of introspection he typically avoided. "I've achieved everything I set out to accomplish," he answered carefully. "But happiness?" He stared into his coffee. That's proven more elusive. Something in his candor seemed to reach her. Sophie has piano until 11, then science club until 1, she said. She doesn't know about this meeting. If, and this is a significant if, we move forward, it will be on my terms, at a pace that prioritizes her emotional well-being. Of course, Dominic agreed quickly. Whatever you think is best. I need time to consider how to approach this, Olivia continued. And if I decide to introduce you properly, you need to understand that this isn't a commitment-free trial. Once Sophie knows who you are, you're in her life consistently or not at all. I understand. Do you? Her eyes searched his. Because this would mean adjusting your priorities permanently. Weekends, school events, ordinary moments that won't make headlines or impress shareholders. For the first time in their conversation, Dominic smiled slightly. You still see me as that ambitious 20-something, don't you? Have you given me reason not to? Fair point, he conceded. But that version of me believed success required sacrificing everything else. I've learned, gradually and not without cost, that he was wrong. Their conversation extended beyond the cooling coffee into a cautious exchange of the intervening years. Olivia described Sophie's early milestones, her emerging personality, her passion for both science and art. Dominic listened with an attention he typically reserved for critical negotiations, absorbing details of the life he'd missed with growing regret. 3 weeks later, after careful preparation and several preliminary meetings between the adults, Olivia invited Dominic to Sunday lunch at their home, a modest but charming craftsman with a garden where Sophie grew sunflowers and tomatoes. So you're my biological father, Sophie said matter-of-factly after Olivia had gently explained the situation. They sat at the kitchen table, afternoon light streaming through windows framed by plants. Yes, Dominic confirmed, struck by her directness. Though I haven't earned the right to call myself your dad? Sophie considered this with a seriousness beyond her years. Mom says you had important work that took you away. Dominic glanced at Olivia, recognizing her generosity in framing his absence this way. The truth is, I made a mistake, he told Sophie. I thought I had to choose between different kinds of important things, and I chose wrong. People make mistakes, Sophie offered, with the simple wisdom of childhood. My science teacher says mistakes are how we learn, as long as we pay attention to the results. That's very wise, Dominic said, unexpectedly moved. I'm paying attention now. The months that followed required adjustments from all three. Dominic restructured his corporate responsibilities, delegating day-to-day operations to his executive team while focusing on strategic direction. He purchased a second home in Portland, splitting his time between cities. Reed Technologies opened a Pacific Northwest research division, providing legitimate business reasons for his frequent presence. For Sophie, the transition brought questions and occasional confusion, but also new dimensions to her world. She discovered inherited traits that Olivia had never been able to explain: her mathematical intuition, her strategic thinking in chess, her occasional intense focus that excluded all distractions. For Olivia, the evolution proved most complex. Years of self-sufficiency made collaboration in parenting unfamiliar territory. Old wounds resurfaced unexpectedly, triggered by phrases or gestures that echoed past hurts. Yet watching Sophie's relationship with her father develop brought unexpected healing. She looks like you when she's concentrating, she remarked to Dominic one evening as they watched Sophie working on a science project in the garden. But she has your resilience, he replied. Your compassion. A year into this new arrangement, Dominic found himself at a school science fair, standing beside Olivia as Sophie explained her experiment comparing Renaissance pigment compositions to modern equivalents. Did you ever imagine this? Olivia asked quietly, watching their daughter confidently field questions from judges. No, Dominic admitted. I couldn't have imagined what I was giving up. We can't change the past, Olivia said, echoing words she'd repeated throughout their journey. But the future isn't fixed. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, her science fair blue ribbon proudly displayed beside her certificate for piano, Dominic and Olivia sat on her porch swing. the comfortable silence of co-parents who had found an unexpected peace. "Thank you," Dominic said suddenly, "for being brave enough to give me a second chance, for raising our daughter with such strength when I failed you both." Olivia considered his words. "Forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened," she said finally. "It's about creating space for something new to grow alongside the history we carry." As stars emerged above Portland's quiet streets, Dominic reflected on the empire he'd built and the emptiness it had contained. True wealth, he was learning, couldn't be measured in acquisitions or stock prices. It existed in moments like these, ordinary, profound, irreplaceable. Sophie's science teacher had been right. Mistakes could teach powerful lessons if one paid attention to the results. His greatest failure had ultimately led to his most meaningful success, learning that no achievement could compare to the privilege of being present for his daughter's life and the unexpected gift of building bridges across the broken places of the past.